the next day. What we're talking about in this session is intentionally investing in people so that those people will intentionally invest in other people. What we're talking about is what Jesus did with the 12. What we are talking about is what the apostle said in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. So let's talk this afternoon. First of all, we need to believe again. I think I'm speaking to people who have something to give. We need to stop the small talk and just go out and do something. You say a little lunch, 5 small loaves of bread and 2 little fish. It's been packed neatly in a little basket for a long time, but if you'll bring what you have to Jesus, He'll take it and multiply it and feed a hungry world. We need to believe in God. He still wants to do the impossible. Too often He is not in our equation, but constantly be telling your people and telling yourself that God is able. No service is disposable. No activity is up for grabs. No event is routine. Everything we do here is intentional, and we need you on our team. Believe in people. You've been hurt, no doubt, and disappointed. I sure have. Started out when I was a bus captain. You need all the help you can get. And a lady quit. One of my main helpers quit. I asked her why. She said, well, I make those nice songs, and then when we're bouncing down the road and you're holding these songs and the kids are singing, she said, then sometimes you let them slip out onto the floor as if they don't even matter. That prepared me for the board member who resigned, and that prepared me for the associate pastor that I loved and cared about, who backslid. Just make it easy for people who hurt you or jump off the wagon. Make it easy for them to get back up on the wagon. And many times you'll have to fly a little higher to help people and practice what you preach, divine love. Believe in your church. There's a reason your church is there. Make it the best it can be. I'm not talking about bragging on you or your particular ministry. Or, since I've been here, things have really grown. And that's not what I'm talking about, but brag on your people. I let them know often that if I was not pastor there, I'd want to attend here. Amen. And I think that if it's not the kind of church you'd want to attend, you ought to find another church to pastor. I thanked my people recently that my children, just in the last couple of services, I thanked them that my children were able to grow up in our church. The other day, my son Jameson put on Twitter, God blessed my life when He made me a pastor's kid. Much thanks to the consistent and Christ-like men and women that have pointed me to Him. That made my day and my week and my year. There's a reason this church is here. You can talk about the great people of the past. They worked so hard to put this church on this street. They gave, they sacrificed, they worked, they prayed to give us a true faith and a great church. And by God's grace, I believe I'm speaking to a group of people. I'm saying if I was standing in front of your congregation, I would say, I believe I'm speaking to a group of people who refuse to fail our generation, and we intend to keep these doors open and make a difference in our community for Christ. There ought to always be something you're raising money for special. There ought to always be a work project that you're looking to do next. There ought to always be a new ministry you're thinking about and talking about. There ought to always be a new person that you're working on. First Sunday of the year, I had the privilege to, second Sunday of the year, I had the privilege to speak at Hobe Sound Bible Church. And I really felt led to preach an evangelistic sermon on Sunday morning. And a couple of people responded to the altar, and we prayed with them. And as I was leaving, they came up to me so excited, they said, that was the manager at Wendy's. We have been inviting him to church. Numbers of our people go in there, and we've been talking to him. I believe it was Benjamin McDowell, maybe some others had gone to his home and invited him to church, and they just started coming for the last few weeks, and on that Sunday morning, he got saved. Praise God. Believe in your church. Believe in the cause. The holiness way is the way. I believe that with all of my heart. Believe it. Some will walk away, but some more will stick. Believe in people and that they're God's plan to further His kingdom in this hour. Give your 5 little barley loaves and your 2 little fish to Jesus. Wherever I go across the holiness movement, where someone is doing something, something is happening. Secondly, we need to invest again because we're so busy and because we get stuck in ruts doing what we've always done. In a fresh way, in a new way, we need to invest. We need to invest in people. Investment always costs something. It costs time, it costs money, it costs comfort. But there's something about investment that makes it worth every dollar. There is such a thing as compound interest. There will be a multiplication to your efforts. And as you live out your life and you look past in the past and look at what's happening, what a thrill to see the smallest efforts multiplied. First of all, to invest, give everyone a job. Facts are you need to give everyone a chance to do something. Look down through your church, if it's 10 or 100 or 700 or whatever. Look down through your church and through your class or whatever and give everyone something to do. They need to do it worse than you need it done. Think up stuff for people to do. We have a fellow that turns on the lights and turns them off every service. We have somebody that unlocks the doors and locks them up every service. Security is an issue in this day. Surely you have one person in your congregation that would just love that job. Various parts of the church, maybe someone's not willing to be the janitor, but they could take care of this specific issue. Buses that need cleaned or greeters at the door. We try to involve everybody in our church, whether they're conservative or not. We keep our platform clean to the very best of our ability. I'm not saying that sometimes mistakes don't happen, but we do our best. We have platform standards, and we hold to those standards, but we do our very best to keep everybody involved in our church. Maybe I would draw the line different than you. We're not here to argue about that, but what I'm just saying is you need to have everybody involved. When we moved in, I've always been the pastor that stood outside and welcomed everybody to church. When we moved into the new church, it's just a whole new ballgame. It's just a lot of entrances and a lot of people, and so we went to greeters, and people were excited about it. And of course, at first, I had conservative greeters. But they just kept canceling on me. So I thought, what am I going to do? I have all these people. We've got to welcome the people. Now, this is worldly. I wouldn't suggest you do it. I'm just telling you what I did. So I decided, well, we'll schedule some conservative greeters and worldly greeters all in the same time. So at least we're maintaining something, but we've got to have somebody to say hello to people. My conservative greeters always cancel first. And I don't understand the theology with that, but I am telling you that we do our best to keep everybody involved. All right? Be very careful that you're not just giving non-conservative people the dirty jobs. So you have your conservative people singing on the platform, and you have your non-conservative people who are always cleaning the bus. I'm not suggesting that non-conservative people should sing on the platform, but I am suggesting that conservative people should clean buses too. I don't know all the jobs you can come up with. One of the neatest things we've done in recent years was the sportsman's dinner at our church. It doesn't interest me a lick. I don't like to hunt or fish, and certainly don't like to eat it. But I'm in Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere. That's the biggest thing. I mean, first day of deer season is bigger than Christmas. and the schools are closed. It's truly an event. So we had this suggestion, and it's just turned huge. It's turned into, I don't know how many people were there. I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm sure there was over 500 people there this year. Over 500 people were there this year. Now, what else that did for us is it got so many people to our place that, never would come for anything else. I mean, they're not even Easter people, but they'll come for this. And I'll tell you what else it did. It got a whole nother category of people, some guys involved, that we could, you know what I'm saying? We could use them to help with the meal. We could use them in any way. And if I pastored anywhere that had any connection to any hunting, it's the first thing I'd do. And I'm not a hunter, but I'd do it because it's a great thing and an easy way to pack out your church and give you context for the future. So we've only been doing it a few years, but it's the largest sportsman's dinner in our area, in our immediate area. And people already know about our church just because of that one event. Just the other day, there's a guy that gets to church so early, I thought we need to give him a job. One thing I can't stand and I didn't look up here, forgive Lebanon, they have so much on their hands, but mic cords. The devil gets in the mics and gets in the mic cords, and they get all tangled up, and then, they're just all over the platform. So there's this guy, I just talked to him about 2 Sundays ago. I gave him a job, and he's going to make sure that every single mic cord after every service is just neat and round. And of course, I like cordless mics too, but real mics only work about 75% of the time, and cordless mics only work about 50% of the time. So I just throw that in. Give everyone a job. And then under this also, start young. It's common for us to use our young people on our platform. If you've been to the Central Pennsylvania Youth Convention, you know they open our service, they pray over our service. I've started this at IHC in Dayton. I think it's good for our young people to be on the platform, to feel like that they're a part. It's not just for a novelty. It's the fact that we want them to know that we value them in our services, and it's also an encouragement to all of the rest of us to see young people step up into places like this. My wife began teaching Sunday school at age 13. I was a teenager when I became a bus captain. I was giving patriotic speeches at a camp meeting every July 4th when I was just 13, 14, 15. Friday night of our revivals have become youth night. Everybody comes, but we advertise it as youth night. And I was so pleased when the last time we had that youth night that one of our young people was leading the choir song. One Wednesday night, years ago, I had a Wednesday night where just young people did everything. I didn't even go to the platform. No one even knew this was going to happen. But we had all of those young people. They just went up and they did their thing, did an entire Wednesday night. And Eric Coons, who gave the devotional, is now on the mission field. And Natasha is a pastor's wife. She played the piano, and several others in that service. I just heard Steve Gibson give a lesson. He called it Lessons from Ricky and Skylar, his grandchildren. He wanted to put on a roof, and he said, I found out it was easier to put on a roof than train roofers. It would be much easier for me to do it myself, but I wanted to train these two little tykes. They want to help, but it takes the job longer. But he said, if you wait till they're 14 to do something besides push a wheelbarrow, there'll be no interest at age 14. In Papua New Guinea, they have this down to a science. I put that picture there. First time I was ever in Papua New Guinea, we had evening services in the city, and all through the day, the youth were out on the streets singing, testifying, praying with people. And that was one of the youth groups on the back of that truck, young guys. So all these years later, I was just there in the fall, and I showed somebody that picture, because these young guys really stood out to me. They were out every day preaching, singing. In the evenings, they were praying before the service. I said, do you know any of these guys? Of course, I knew one of them because the last time I was there for the camp meeting, he was the evangelist, one of the guys on the back of that pickup truck. And they said, oh yes, one of those young men is no longer serving the Lord. One of those young men is in heaven. And every one of those other young men are preaching the gospel still today. Praise God. In Papua New Guinea, they're constantly pushing them to preach, to sing, to evangelize, and in little ways to get leadership early in their life. Brother Stetler and I were there in the fall. Some of the Bible college students, the only way for them to get there was to walk, so they traveled 4 or 5 days by foot to get to the conference, through the jungles, over rivers. Every village they came to, they evangelized. And in one particular village, every man, woman, boy, and girl in the village got saved. Praise God. Number 2, never refuse help. Sometimes we have our act together so much that we don't want to be interrupted. And you can't believe this, but people refuse help. I don't want to offend anyone, least of all someone in my church. But we just had a funeral meal the other day. And after the funeral, we went over for the funeral meal. It was a delicious meal. A couple in the church did it all by themselves. And they're so proud of themselves, and I'm proud of them too. They are miracle workers, this couple. And I thanked them, and I deeply do appreciate it right now. If they're listening to this or going to listen to it, I want them to know how much I appreciate it. The meal was absolutely delicious, but as I left, I said, now that'll be the last time. Because there are a bunch of other ladies who needed to be there doing it. It was easier for that couple to do it by themselves. And there wasn't a thing wrong with it. In fact, having other people may have interrupted and it may have not been quite as nice. I don't know. But never refuse help. Number 3, take your ego out of it. Now, I know we're all holiness preachers, so, we don't even believe in it, but we do some things we don't believe in. To multiply leaders, you're going to have to give all the credit to them and just don't touch any of the glory. I had a fellow come to youth convention a few years ago, and on Sunday morning he said to me after the service, why were you not on the platform? I said, well, I didn't have anything to do. Why should I be up there? And he was just so shocked that I wouldn't be on the platform, and as I think about it, I'm still shocked that he was shocked. Why do I have to be on the platform? Why do I have to be center of things? If you're working with a team, make sure that team, their name is on your website and on your revival announcements, and make sure they're on the platform in every service, in a sense, involved in the services. You have to give people permission to do things from your own leadership, that they have rope, and give people praise. Don't take the credit, take the blame, but be generous in saying thank you. I do my very best to often compliment the guys that I work with. Some guys, it takes a special talent to be the second man, but it takes some kind of something to be the first man, in the sense that not everybody can even do that. It really astounds me, but when I worked for the ministerial department at Penview, we had a particular internship that was a complete failure because the pastor seemed threatened by the young man. The pastor seemed threatened. It felt like jealousy to me, but we don't believe in that. So he felt threatened by this young man. Number 4, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's easier to do it yourself. It'll get done better if you do it. But it is more important that they do it than it be done perfect. If your church is going to die from that one mistake because you let somebody try, let it die. I was so blessed. Recently, my wife sent me a picture right during church. Over in the orchestra was John Anthony. John Anthony is like the best trumpeter. He just plays the trumpet the very best of anybody I know, really. And so here he is over playing in the orchestra. And in the service, and there's a little kid, a little boy sitting right next to him. And John Anthony is pointing out things on the sheet music and helping him play in the orchestra. And I said, and so I said publicly how much I appreciated that. And I said, I'll tell you what, if I was a young man in this congregation and I've had any interest in a trumpet, I'd get on the other side of him. Sure enough, next service, there was a kid on each side of John in the church orchestra. Big deal if they hit a wrong note. Number 5, choose your battles. As you work with people, there's always going to be things. So if you're going to fuss about every little detail, decide what is most important. And be very careful when you're demanding something or asking something and the wife is not on board. Yes, she needs to get on board, but that's a whole other category. Choose your battles. Number 6, lay out clear boundaries. Be clear. Those you work with need to know what the boundaries are, especially at the beginning. It's harder later. The longer I live and the more I am involved with people that I work with, the longer those sessions get, because everything matters in the work of the Lord. And lay out clear boundaries for them. Let them map it out themselves, but put the boundaries in very strongly. It's very hard later, once you're involved in a relationship, or let's say an assistant pastor role or a youth pastor role, or whether it's a bus captain or anything else, it can be very hard to discuss with them something that you would like corrected. But if you can just put the boundaries very clear at the beginning. Communication is very key through the whole process of trying to multiply leaders. It is amazing to me how many pastoral staffs don't meet on a regular basis. This should be an absolute given that the people you work with, and I'm talking from a pastoral standpoint here, but be sure you're meeting constantly with the people that you're trying to lead. In casual settings and over food. All meetings go better over food. We meet every Monday noon. Pastor Schaefer, Pastor Malloyd, and I. I mean, you need to have a consistent weekly meeting. If you only meet when there's a problem, you are already in a problem. So we meet every Monday. Vast majority of those meetings on Monday, all we're doing is we're talking about good things that happened yesterday and a couple bad things that happened yesterday, and we pray together, we dream together, we talk together, and we just laugh together, and we, just talk. But, 52 Sundays of the year, there's going to be a time or two whenever one of us don't agree with the other one, and something happened that the other one doesn't like. But since we're already meeting anyway, these things can come out in a decent way. But I'm shocked, constantly shocked, at how many teams don't have a regular time of meeting. It's just a text here and an email here and a hi there and a bye there, and they see you at service. You're setting yourself up for a problem that doesn't have to be. I have, across the holiness movement, leadership, I think, was a little more given about what was expected. We didn't have social media. but I think there were general characteristics of a pastor or a pastor's wife that were not all written in a manual. You take most of the pastors and pastors' wives here at this bus convention of any age, they're going to all generally be the same in their appearance, so forth, so on. I have laymen come to me and say, Brother Plank, we can't hardly believe it. Our pastor's wife, we just saw her at the grocery store in short sleeves. And it just blows them away. It's the first time they've ever had a pastor like this. And then there's this huge blow up and problem. And the first question I have been known to ask is just simply this. Well, did you, when you asked them to come to your church, did you go over what you expected in a pastor and pastor's wife in some of these areas? Well, no, we just thought, well, you can't assume. If something's important to your congregation or something's important to your team, you can no longer assume. You cannot assume about social media. If you're concerned, social media being very key. We do a lot of internships at the church. We had a intern scheduled. He liked something. It came to my attention that he liked something. It involved a problem in our general area, somebody who was a problem, and he liked that on social media. I met with him. It was Saturday. His internship began on Sunday. I met with him on Saturday. I said, okay, we're starting a 6-week internship. I said, this is lesson number 1 before it begins. Social media really matters because all of our young people and all of our people are watching the things you like, the things you don't like, and the stuff you're feeding on. And you liked this on social media. What was the purpose of that? And he said, I don't agree with that, but I was just a general friendship. I said, well, that's understandable. I said, I understand where you're coming from. But I tried to explain to him what that could look like to people in a congregation that you're trying to lead, that you liked that when that's really a serious deviation. And he agreed with me. He said, Brother Plank, thank you for pointing that out. And I said, it's this serious. If you would tell me in this meeting that you like that you truly do like that, then the internship's over because I don't want not 1 week of influence on my people. So lay out clear boundaries. A girl just asked Matt Malloyd, youth pastor, about if she could play in the orchestra. Gave him an excellent opportunity, and we lay out those boundaries. And I'm only mentioning this because this is real stuff. It gave Matt an opportunity to explain to her what we expect in our orchestra as far as modesty and appearance. And do you want to know something? She was, no problem. She was right ready to comply, no problem. And that's what I want to say about laying out the clear boundaries. If a church says this is what we want, or this is what ought to be, that young couple will gladly comply. If they're at all of any kind of a heart that wants to do what's right, they'll gladly comply. But if you don't have the boundary there and you don't tell them, then we just perpetuate something that's unbelievably sad in our movement. And so I wish we would lay out clear boundaries in our churches and ministries. I've never had a bad experience in telling a young person what we expect in our church. Never. The only time I've ever had a bad experience if it's somebody that's already on their way south. They've already made up their mind. But young people will do as they're told. They will go where they're taught. And so I say lay out clear boundaries. Keep the purpose constant. We have our goals on the wall, and I try to preach through our goals once per year. And I put them on your handout just for your interest. Number 8, have the hard conversations. Only like one time. The reason I say this is if you make everything a hard conversation, you're in a tough way. But there's some real biggies. that need to be clear to the people you're trying to lead. And, dirt, debt, and the devil would be three good ones. But we need to be constantly, immorality has pervaded our every fabric of society. And so, constantly as we're working with the people, we cannot just assume that this is, I want to assume that our young people know that, you don't go into a room with a woman by yourself. You don't, you don't get touchy-feely. I know Chris Cravens is very touchy-feely, but I don't think that's what he had in mind last night. You don't get touchy-feely, We assume that until we hear of another stupid casualty. And so the people you work with in your bus ministry, in your church, lay those boundaries. And then if you have to have the conversation, have it for the sake of their ministry, for the sake of their future. You can't be too careful. Number 9, celebrate often. We say where exciting things are always happening. Whether they're exciting or not, we try to make them exciting. So many things we do have to be thankful for, but we just constantly are trying to be excited about what we're doing. And if it gets too long without something happening, we've got to make something up. Because there's one thing people can't stand, and that's boredom. People would rather you fuss than be boring. So, we had the youth convention just a few weeks ago there at the church, and so we've done our best the very next Sunday to thank the people, go out of our way to talk about it. People usually just stare at you with their teeth in their mouth, but do it anyhow. Constantly be celebrating the successes. Be careful that it's not about you, but I'm saying their successes. Your biggest opportunity to multiply leaders is with your own children or grandchildren. I wanted my kids to love ministry, so they did everything with us. When we had to travel for IHC, I was determined that they would go along. We homeschooled. It was not popular in our family. It was not popular in our community. We were right on the outskirts of Penview. Penview is a great school, but they said if this is not Penview, but the people in charge at the time said if this is what you want, then you'll have to homeschool. So we had the school upset with us. We had the family upset with us. I have zero regrets. Took our kids all over the country. And now that both of my kids are about ready to fly the coop, I have zero regrets. They went with us all kinds of places, did what we did. And we were not the kind of home where Sunday night, you go home and get to bed at a decent hour. The kids did what we did. Stayed up late, helped us get things back in order, and I have zero regrets. They're not going to be valedictorian, but that's not their fault. Jennifer's down at Hobe Sound, and she, when I was down there, something was said. She wasn't complaining big time, but she said about how all those students have to move out of their dorm rooms for camp. And I heard it. All the kids, all the students have to move out of this has been for years. They have to move out of their dorm room for camp meeting, and other people move into their room. And a day or so passed, and I said to Jennifer, Jennifer, I want to tell you want to know what makes me about the happiest that you came down to Hobe Sound? She said, what's that? I said, the fact that you have to move out of your dorm room for camp? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but I'm telling you the truth. That means so much to me because that's how ministry is, the rest of your life. How many times have my wife and I moved out of our room so somebody else could stay in it? And I thank God for that opportunity. I noticed on social media that Hobe Sound was celebrating that. FEA, Seabreeze Camp, was celebrating that on social media with videos of all the kids, all the Bible college kids putting the campus back together again. And I thought how beautiful that is because that's how it's going to be if you're going to be a leader. Well, Brother Plank, I feel called to be a leader. Well, start by moving out of your dorm room. Start by being there to volunteer when it's time. Then you'll be the kind of leader that God wants you to be. You have a lunch that God wants to multiply, and I pray that you will. That's all I have today. Do you have any questions on your heart? Thank you, Brother Keith.
Amen. Well, I truly enjoyed that. I'm sure you did as well. Thank you, Brother Plank, for sharing with us this afternoon. Well, it gives you a little bit of time to the next session. The next session will be at 3 o'clock here. You can look over the schedule, and thank you again so much for being here this afternoon. And if you haven't already, we've got our vendors down in the Family Life Center. That's open, and you're more than welcome to look and see what Leonard Robb has. Penview Visuals is down there, and there's other stands down there as well. Also, every session is being recorded, and if you do want those recordings, please see Nick Ryan or please see the registration desk, and we can make sure we get those recordings to you. God bless you. Thank you for being here this afternoon.